Peter Hitchens, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you too.
So, I'm glad to see you working on a bank holiday. There is this kind of... I always think of the 70s when I think of bank holidays. We had May this year, there was like 3 bank holidays in 1 month.
Yes, I think there was a time, the Victorian and Edwardian era, when so few people had time off work, when it was really important for the law to state that this should happen. I seldom enjoy that. I mean, having worked for nearly 50 years in the newspaper trade, I've got used to working.
You just work whenever.
I actually now make almost a principle of working on them because I don't like Mondays off anyway. They're not. No, it's not a good. If the only public holiday apart from Christmas, which I really like, is the American Thanksgiving, where it's on Thursday.
Yes.
So you have a longer weekend, the longer beginning of the weekend, rather than 2 Sundays, which is what we always provide.
Yes.
And I don't really see really much benefit in it. Now, most people do get substantial paid holidays. It's a rather strange thing. Yeah. They always stuck with it. It's very hard to take it away once you've got it. If other people enjoy it, I don't want to get in their way, but there it is. You know, the August bank holiday used to be at the beginning of August, not the end.
Oh, did it?
Yep.
Because people have said to me today that this is the sort of one bank holiday they think is probably appropriate because it comes, albeit at the end of August, it's almost like the end of summer. Sort of
I think that's why it got moved.
A bit like sort of Labour Day.
When the First World War broke out on August the 4th, 1914, it was the day after the August the 3rd, the August bank holiday. Yeah. Which was then at the beginning of the month, and then they changed it. But yeah, sure. And the Americans have Labor Day, which is actually quite a nice holiday too, because of the time of year.
Yes. Because they can mark their
September.
Seasons, can't they? Because they have proper seasons. I mean, you can almost mark them.
Their weather is much more predictable than ours is. I mean, you can see it coming from miles off. But yeah, it's not for me to knock anybody else's holiday. But it just never really moved me very much. The August bank holiday, and I prefer to come into work. Beautiful this morning in London.
Lovely.
Riding a bicycle through the centre of London, the parks and all around Hyde Park Corner was almost no traffic. Yeah. It's like going back 50 or 60 years into the quiet and the cleanness of the air. And rather enjoyable. You won't see that very often.
You really won't. And then of course we've got the ulez charge kicking in tonight. Yes. Which can't be a good thing, and it's probably going to be very chaotic, and from what I can gather, is going to be very difficult to enforce.
Well, I think so, but the whole approach of so many people towards the car problem, and there is a car problem, is to browbeat drivers. Yeah. A lot of people don't drive because they want to, they drive because they have to. Yeah. Their lives can't be fitted around public transport, especially the public transport which we have. Yeah. They can't bicycle or they can't walk, and a lot of people who would like to bicycle and walk daren't do so. Or send their children, for instance, to school on foot or by bicycle, as they would have done 50 years ago, because it's too dangerous. If people want to reduce car ownership, they need to tackle those things. They need better public transport, and they need to make the roads safer for particularly children going to school. Causes an awful lot of traffic congestion. You can tell the moment the schools come back, the streets fill up again hugely because people are now driving their children to work because they daren't let them go.
Well, there really isn't any way. Where my kids live, right? One of my children is going to a new school next month, next couple of weeks actually. Need to get some things for him. There isn't anything in the small high street which actually sells anything that he can buy for school. So we have to drive to a nearby sort of shopping centre, which is not near enough to walk to, and it's the only way to get there. There's no bus that goes there, there's no train that goes there, nothing.
No, our society is designed around the car, so we make people drive, and then we say, now we're going to penalise you for driving. Yeah. Now, this is the wrong way around, isn't it? Right. And in Switzerland, where they decided they were going to try and reduce driving, particularly in Zurich, they introduced fantastic new public transport, trams, so good. Yeah. Rich businessmen left their Mercedes-Benz at home because the trams
were clean,
that's
frequent. I mean, the places where I understand there to be trams, Edinburgh's got them now, Manchester's got them, I think Sheffield's got them. Yeah. You know, people use them, people like them.
Yeah, they haven't. They're simply the networks aren't big enough. You need to go to continental cities, and one of my favourites is Strasbourg, on the French-German border. You can actually go to Germany on a tram in Strasbourg. Nice. And they cover everything.
Yes.
People use them. They're very busy.
I was in Edinburgh when they were arguing about building the tram network, and it was supposed to go from the airport all the way into town to Princes Street and then down to Leith. And of course, it only ended up doing about half of about half of the places it was supposed to go. It's
hopelessly slow, and it gives the whole idea a bad name because people think, well, if that's what trams involve, I don't want it. But of course, Edinburgh would be hugely improved if it had a proper system. And I would imagine until about 1948 or 49, probably did have a system which was then pulled up.
Yeah. Well, when I was a child, a very long time ago, as you were, where they had these things called trolley buses in Glasgow, and I remember those because they were actually buses on wheels with a sort of electric cable above them.
Oh no, they had them in Moscow. I used to travel into the Kremlin.
They were quite good.
When I travelled into the Kremlin from where I lived, it was a straight run, the number 2 trolley bus. So also, when they opened the first Pizza Hut in Moscow, I'd go down and pick up my ruble pizzas by...
Presumably they were electric, these things.
Oh yeah, they were electric.
So they were green.
They've gone now.
So they were green. You could have actually used them for the green agenda.
In those filthy Russian power station burning who knows what was covering Moscow with plumes of filth to provide the electricity. No, they're not green. Right. It's a myth, but they're a good deal greener than cars.
Well, we've got electric buses now, and we don't know where that electricity comes from.
Well, no, probably from the Netherlands, which is where an awful lot of our electricity comes from, because we import it, because we can't make enough ourselves. And almost, I think, about 70% of the electricity in the Netherlands is generated by coal or gas.
Yes.
So it's not green.
No.
So all those e-scooters, e-bikes, e-cars, they're all...
Paris, by the way, has banned them.
No, they've banned higher ones, but I've met someone who recently came back from Paris the other day, and it's not... there is no ban. It's just a fake. It's still a terror.
It's a bit like banning drugs.
Well, it's the war on e-scooters. Let's call it. It doesn't exist.
Let's talk about, because a couple of interesting things you wrote this weekend. One about the serious debate about the death penalty, which I thought was a fascinating piece.
Well,
because people always talk about the death penalty, don't they?
They get worked up about it, and instead of getting worked up about it, I decided I couldn't do this. I had to. I felt that the logic was remorseless, that a society which wanted to protect its people from serious violence had to have the death penalty as a weapon. So I went into it a lot. I looked up the arguments and the facts, and I also I decided that I ought to see an execution, in fact, which in the USA is, for a journalist, is...
It can be done, can't it?
It's not impossible. Quite a lot of the places which conduct executions, the local guy for the Associated Press is sick of going to executions and will very happily hand over the job to somebody else to do it. So that's how I got into a couple. So I've seen an execution by lethal injection and one by electrocution, because I thought, if I'm going to talk about this, I ought to know what it looks like. And it's not pleasant, and I don't pretend that it is. But on the other hand, I don't think imprisoning people for 60 or 70 years is pleasant either, and in many ways I think it's worse. And I've been inside prisons and looked at that too. But the fundamental thing that people don't understand is what capital punishments properly exercised deters. It doesn't deter murder as such. There are some murders which you can't deter, as emotional, domestic murders. You're not going to deter that. People have stopped thinking. What it does deter, and it demonstrably deters, is the carrying of lethal weapons by criminals. There's a guy, an ex-policeman called Colin Greenwood, who did the work. When we had the death penalty in this country up till 1965, we suspended it twice, once in 1948 and once in 1956, while Parliament debated abolishing it. And what Greenwood did was he looked at the figures for the carrying of weapons by criminals and offences involving that during the periods of suspension. And during the periods of suspension, the carrying of weapons by criminals went up sharply. When the suspension ended, it went down again. So that's what it deters. The other thing is, what we don't realise in this country is how fantastically good our trauma surgery and our paramedics are in picking up from the street, taking to hospital and treating people who've been very seriously injured, often by knives. And we save a huge number of lives of people who, under the medical conditions of 50 years ago, would have died. And if we didn't have such a good health service and such a good ambulance service, we would have a homicide rate in this country on an American level, but we don't, because we catch these people and save them. Now that, I believe, is also something which would have been deterred by the death penalty. These offences, they arise in the statistics as woundings with intent to kill, or attempted murder, or serious woundings, and they're very serious crimes. But they're not capital, because people don't actually die. But people can actually now, in modern Britain, you can be stabbed in the heart. And if they get to you quickly enough, they will save your life. But 50 years ago, if someone stabbed you in the heart, then you would die. And that person would have been arrested, convicted, and tried for murder. Now, so the statistics conceal a major change which has taken place since the death penalty was abolished in this country, and the statistics conceal it, and so does the brilliance of our medical system. But you don't really. I don't think that means we're safer as a result of it, and I think people should consider it. The problem with it is that you have to be so careful not to execute the wrong person.
Yes, and that's part of the problem.
It is part of the problem.
You looked at the numbers there, and so many people on death row never actually get executed.
Oh, they don't get executed. It is mainly the death penalty exists in the USA as a token used by supposedly tough politicians to look as if they're tackling crime. The most glaring instance of this is Bill Clinton.
Yes,
going back during his presidential election campaign in '92, going back to Arkansas to very noisily superintend the execution of a man called Ricky Ray Rector, who had killed two people. He killed one person, then he killed a police officer. And the reason why this case is very confused is because Rector then turned his gun on himself and did himself serious brain damage. So people think he famously, given his last meal, asked to leave the pie to eat later. Right. So he was obviously not compost when he was executed. Clinton got into a lot of trouble for that. Yeah. But it was typical. He was really a liberal. Yeah. But he wanted to appear to be tough on crime. A lot of people think that it was that which persuaded quite a number of conservative working-class voters to vote for him in that election. That's why it exists. It doesn't... Louisiana...
And a few Southern Democrats, I suppose.
Yeah, sure, but Louisiana has, I think, 400 or 500 murders a year. Yeah. And technically it has the death penalty, but there hasn't been an execution in Louisiana since 2010. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't really exist, so the idea that it could deter is pretty thin, honestly. Yeah. And even Texas, where they execute more, still has huge numbers of murders each. I think 1,200 a year.
That George Bush executed a load of people in a hurry because that again wanted to make some political.
It is horribly political, and of course that would also encourage erroneous executions. You can't totally guarantee. I don't think that you will never execute the wrong person because humanity is prone to failing. And also, when you get so many barricades against doing it that I think it could be reliably done.
It came up this week, obviously, because of the Lucy Letby case, and an awful lot. Whenever there's a case like that, where somebody appears to be, or is kind of personified as evil. And is written about as if they are an evil person, then that's when the debate starts again, isn't it?
Oh, quite.
Because people say, well, what's the point of paying for this person to be in a prison, living a relatively comfortable life for the rest of time?
But 3 weeks before, all the controversy was about Andrew Malkinson, who'd been put in prison for a horrible rape and had been described at the time of his conviction as an evil person and treated as one by the system, who then turned out to be totally innocent. So I think what's wrong at the moment, I would say that in principle, if pressed, I'd say, yes, I am in favour of the death penalty, but I couldn't conceivably support it with our criminal justice system in the state it's in at the moment. It's a jalopy. It doesn't work. It can't be relied on. It needs really serious reform in every area. Judges don't seem to me to be in many cases adequate. The Crown Prosecution Service, I mean, everybody knows what's wrong with that. The police. They're not up to it.
I don't think our justice system could in any way support it because it's hard enough getting people to do their job as it is.
Let's have a reformed justice system, and when we've done that, then we can think seriously about whether we can have a death penalty. But the reform of the justice system must come first, and it actually is urgently needed. Whatever your political position is, it cannot be allowed to continue the way it is.
No, I think that's right. Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on TalkTV. Peter Hitchens is with us from the Mail on Sunday. Another piece you wrote this week, Peter, about Donald Trump and the arrest of Donald Trump. We've got a little clip, I think, to look at, which is what Trump said after he was arrested on the tarmac.
Thank you very much for being here. I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support, and that goes with the other ones too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning, And this is one instance, but you have 3 other instances. It's election.
That's it, Donald Trump. Everything's election interference now, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of sad to see America and its political system kind of self-combusting.
Yeah, you have to remember, don't you, that Trump himself was the man who spent an awful lot of time calling for Hillary Clinton to be locked up when he was campaigning against her. So, to some extent, he has released this rather awful business of dragging the criminal law into electoral politics into the world. I don't think he can really entirely escape blame.
Although I suppose there's a difference between saying lock somebody up and actually getting a district attorney to file some charges in order to lock somebody up.
I'm afraid it's the logical conclusion. If that's what, if you mean it when you say it, then that's what you presumably wanted to see happen to Hillary Clinton. I just don't think politics should be conducted in this way.
No, I don't.
It's ultimately it's another form of totalitarianism in which a lot of people will become afraid to enter politics as well, because they think, well, nothing will. I'll just end up spending my life paying lawyers' bills. Yeah. Well,
there's a lot of people already who work for Trump who have said that their lives have been completely ruined.
Oh, they will, because
by defending all these lawsuits.
It's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to stay free, even though they're marginal to the whole thing.
Right.
My problem with Trump is this. Many years ago, when I lived in Washington, D.C., I occasionally got invited to dinners with left-wing and liberal people. I remember at one of them, the particular person, having discovered who I was and what I did, was looking down his nose at me from a great height. And I said, you have to understand, I am a civilized, thoughtful conservative. I believe very strongly in democracy and respecting my opponents, in the rule of law, in arguing seriously about issues. I believe in pluralism, that there should be differing political opinions, that there should be an opposition, that everything should be open to proper debate. And what I say, you respond to what I say by treating me as if I was a moron and a menace.
Right.
Now, you carry on doing this for long enough, then your opponents will not be people like me. Your opponents will be people who simply want to shove you aside and trample on you, and who will raise which is always there, and it's there very much in America, will raise the spirit of loathing of Washington, D.C., and they will sweep you aside. They won't care what you say. They won't have any respect for pluralism. And I believe that evening I predicted Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I think Donald Trump was created by liberal arrogance, and that he was conjured out of the ground by liberal arrogance. Says, okay, we won't pay any attention to civilized or thoughtful conservatism. This is what you get. And I think the same thing threatens very much in this country.
Because what you get here, and I get this as I'm sure you do, and social media isn't always a good guide of these things, but it's an indication that basically they've categorised anybody who's right-wing as evil, bigoted, racist, homophobic, all of those words that they use which are derogatory.
You're a bad person. It's not just that you're wrong.
You're a bad person because of your beliefs.
Yes. You're not just wrong, you're bad, in which case, of course, you're not entitled to be anywhere near the democratic process or to be anywhere near office or power. Now, oddly enough, I had a debate up in Edinburgh with Polly Toynbee, my sort of opposite number on The Guardian the other day. We actually managed to have a very civilised, friendly, humorous debate, although we continued to disagree with each other ferociously about all the issues. And I thought, why can't we manage this in British politics, and why is it so shallow anyway? I long for there to be. I mean, both Polly and I suppose, she well to the left of her side, I well to the right of my side, but we managed to get on fine. Why can't
it can be done?
It absolutely, not only can it be done, it's essential. Your opponents are not your enemies. You can't govern a free country that way, because sooner or later your opponents will be in power and you'll be out of it. And there has to be this thing called loser's consent, where the people who lose the election, and this is what Trump is preaching, people who lose the election have to accept that they've lost it. Because if you raise, even Richard Nixon, who thought probably that Kennedy had won the 1960 presidential election by rigging, and had good evidence on this. Even Nixon, who was nobody's idea of a nice person, did not raise it because he knew that the danger of doing so would rip apart a consensus in the country. Losers' consent is a vital part of any democracy. You have to be willing, if you're going to take all the spoils when you win, you have to be willing to walk out of Downing Street or walk out of the White House with at least a cheerful countenance and say, I've lost when you lose.
But then I guess, in addition to all of that, you also must have a relative view on the judiciary involving itself in all of these cases, because if you're Donald Trump right now, you're going, there are now 4 cases against me, almost all of which are likely to end in no conviction whatsoever, I don't think, because they're so ridiculous, most of the cases.
I think the Georgia one, I mean, who can say where it's going to end? I think the Georgia one is probably a greater danger to him than the others, because apart from anything else, he can't, if he is convicted, and I make no prejudgment on this, it's a racketeering case, which was designed to make conviction easier, let's remember.
But it was also
if he is convicted, he cannot pardon himself, because it's a state rather than a federal offence.
But I don't know whether that means he can't be president.
I don't know either.
I think he can still be president if he's found guilty and he's in prison, is my understanding.
Well, you may well be right,
offences.
but then what's the point? What then happens to the American democracy if they have a president? So the presidents of France or the Chancellor of Germany arrive in Washington D.C. and the president's in some jail in Georgia.
They'd have to go to Georgia.
How can this?
Well, it's mad.
How can this possibly not do profound damage to American freedom, law and democracy, that it's got to this stage? It would be comical if it weren't so serious.
Yeah, but the liberal arrogance that you speak of at the dinner table has turned into this judicial arrogance, in my view, where people are making cases against a former president which are quite frankly laughable in many cases. Well,
I don't know. I'm not going to judge whether they're laughable or not. I mean, it is for the courts in a free country to make these judgments. The fact is, it's got this far, and it in the case, and there was this extraordinary event on January the 6th, 2021, which again led to prosecutions. Which
but also,
I know people argue about it. But I find it very hard to and then look what happened to Fox News and their involvement in this and the outcome of that, and for amongst other people for Tucker Carlson. It's not that straightforward. I can't say from this distance, without having studied everything, that nothing's being done. But the fact is that the weaponization of politics, the idea that you should be calling for your opponent to be put in prison, doesn't lie on one side or the other. It's something which has come from both directions. It seems to me.
But it seems to me that if you're going to be accusing people of breaking the criminal code, then the criminal code is previously in existence. So it's you've either broken the law or you haven't.
That's right.
And these are all cases that are being argued, rather than cases which are sort of clear-cut.
I have diminishing...
That's what I'm saying.
I have diminishing respect for the American justice system. I think, oddly enough, the Conrad Black case and his arguments against it were, and the whole existence of plea bargaining, which to an English legal eye is very suspect anyway, has made it much less of a free system than it used to be. And I'm not here to defend it, nor am I here to say that anything about the charges against Donald Trump. That's for the courts. But we are, however, in a very dangerous circumstance in which huge numbers of people are preparing to vote for somebody who may end up in prison. And
it doesn't put them off.
Whether this
it doesn't put them off.
It absolutely doesn't put them off. In some cases, it encourages them. And I can't see how this isn't damaging to the freedom and democracy and rule of law of the most important country in the world. And also, I can't necessarily rule out that something of the kind may not come.
Well, whoever wins the next election, you're going to get more of it, aren't you? Because this is where it all starts, and it's never going to end.
Well, I don't know, but we certainly are. We are in a considerable mess in this country, because our first past the post system, which I strongly support, by the way, and think is much superior to proportional representation, is being tested greatly by the fact that the two main parties simply aren't different enough anymore.
No. And unfortunately, because of the way that it breaks down, and we're right out of time here, but, if you live in a safe seat, you've got no chance, basically. It's going to pretty much stay that way.
You have no... I live in a safe seat. I'm